Thank you, colleagues. That now concludes the selection of the First Minister. It's now time to move on to the next item of business, which will be an urgent question. Now, in order to get as many people in as possible, and a number of people who have supplementaries, I prefer short and succinct questions and answers to match. Adam Harley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it's had with Police Scotland, local authorities and football stakeholders following the disorder seen in Glasgow city centre last weekend.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the First Minister has stated, the Scottish Government utterly condemns the incidents of violence, vandalism and antisocial behaviour that took place on Saturday. Whilst the vast majority of fans are well behaved, it is clear that when a minority are not, the impacts on policing and a range of other services is enormous, and it is the taxpayer that foots the bill. We fully support Police Scotland, and I have sent my best wishes to the officers injured in the disorder whilst helping someone with a medical emergency. Ministers have been regularly updated on events, and the Scottish Government has engaged with Police Scotland, Glasgow City Council and SPFL, and incoming ministers will do so again. They will make clear that governing bodies and individual clubs must step up and use their influence to help tackle this continuing misconduct.
Adam Harley.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply, and I also wish the police officers who were injured on Saturday a speedy recovery. The overwhelming majority of supporters enjoyed their day responsibly, and I think it's important that any measures that may come forward do not unfairly impact or punish law-abiding fans. But does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that all football clubs and relevant authorities have a shared responsibility to minimise the risk of disorder around major fixtures and celebrations? And where these preparations require to be backed by funding, where does the Government think this funding should come from?
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, I thank Mr Harley for his question and, of course, congratulate him for being the first member to successfully lodge an urgent question of this new session of Parliament. He is quite correct to state that the majority of sports fans and football fans are law-abiding facilities, but we have seen the consequences when the mindless minority impact on our communities, on our policing, and this cannot be tolerated. And it is the case that we all, whether government, local authorities, other stakeholders, the football authorities and football clubs, that we must all act together. But it is clear to me, because I stand here before you today as the Justice Secretary, and it is clear to me that if there had been a managed, organised celebration, that the impact on policing would have been much less than it was. Police Scotland had to deploy over 900 police officers and, of course, 2 of their officers were significantly harmed. And we must reflect on that, and each and every stakeholder must get on the same page and ensure that we, where possible, minimise the risk of this happening again.
Adam Harley.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary. It's also not right that local businesses should have to close or clean up, and I think there was a significant impact on local businesses over the weekend. People need to know in advance where in the city is going to be impacted so that any disruption in future can be managed. So whether that's through fan zones, open-top bus parades or whatever other way people want to celebrate. For that to happen, we need coordination and leadership. So what further guidance can the Scottish Government provide to help prevent a repeat of the disruption we saw at the weekend?
Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is useful to note 2 things. Firstly, if the result had been different, that there was a well-planned and coordinated arrangements for a celebration in Edinburgh to take place. And the second factor, if I point to Operation Moonbeam with respect to fireworks, violence and disruption that has blighted our communities. But Operation Moonbeam has taken action all year round with good local leadership that is visible, where the consequences are clear, and that has driven down violence and disorder around fireworks. And I think we need to learn in this instance from Operation Moonbeam.
Thomas Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The scenes we witnessed in Glasgow at the weekend are beyond disgraceful, but let's be blunt, it's happening way too often. And Glaswegians shouldn't have to live with violence, vandalism and behaviour like this every year, and clubs must take responsibility. So does the Minister agree with me that Celtic Football Club and other teams must start paying the bill for disruption and destruction when incidents like this happen, rather than taxpayers?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as I intimated in my original answer, and I will repeat for clarity, that governing bodies and individual clubs must step up and use their influence to help tackle this continued misconduct. And my view is that now nothing should be off the table. I will do what I can within my powers, as will any minister in this government. But no solution should be off the table. We all need to get on the same page and prevent this disorder from happening in the first place.
Paul Sweeney.
Sir, and I welcome you to your place. Cabinet Secretary, does the Government agree with Glasgow City Council's claim that it simply is not credible to establish an official managed fan zone because the cost of it is not a burden the Council can bear? And given that the impact of football in Glasgow is equivalent to a Commonwealth Games every year, could the Government take some leadership in establishing funding pooled together between the local authority, national government, commercial sponsors and the football clubs to establish an official fan zone to prevent Glasgow's streets and emergency services from being subject to entirely preventable disorder every year? Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I have to be candid with the Chamber and say that as Justice Secretary I have had full briefing from Police Scotland just on Friday past on the preparations that had been made irrespective of the result, and I do contrast the preparations that were made in one half of the country in comparison to another. So therefore I have to respectfully disagree with some of the commentary from Glasgow City Council. But I repeat what I said to Mr Kerr. There should be no solutions off the table. We all have something to bring to this. And we have to prevent this happening again. And prevention falls upon us all. It is not down to Police Scotland to be the only player in this. They should not be exposed, and their officers should not be exposed. We know from other experiences that good planning prevents disorder, or at least reduces the risk. And we need to be planning not just in the weeks and months ahead, but like Operation Moonbeam, this has to be a consistent endeavour with good local leadership.
Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've lost count of the number of times that we've had questions like this asked in relation to an incident like this. And I think the citizens of Glasgow are as sick of it as we are, more so, in fact. The behaviour of fans of whichever club, these incidents are simply unacceptable. Surely it's not enough for the Cabinet Secretary to talk about encouraging clubs to step up and show responsibility. Isn't it time that we were very clear and made them face legal consequences for the action of fans in these circumstances? Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I appreciate thoroughly that the good people of Glasgow and the communities impacted by this disorder will be at their wits' end, because as the previous member, Mr Sweeney, said, there are aspects of this behaviour that is predictable, as we have seen over the years. The member will be aware of the action that this government is prepared to take. It's in our manifesto around widening the scope of football banning orders. I am open to any review, for example, involving the criminal law in these matters, but that does not, by any stretch of the imagination, allow any other partner, the football authorities or football clubs, from walking away from their responsibilities. And there should be no solution that's off the table. I think we all need to get together. We will have to have very frank but respectful conversations, and then we all need to get on the same page to prevent this happening. And we do know that sporting sanctions have evidence of having an impact where they have been implemented in Scotland, but also elsewhere in Europe.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scottish Police Federation minutes from May 2025 warned of low staffing levels in public order policing. Now, given the appalling disorder in Glasgow, the estimated 3,000 people involved, the serious injuries to officers and the 1,000 fewer officers that we've got since 2020, will the Cabinet Secretary seek assurances from the Chief Constable that Police Scotland is funded and resourced sufficiently for the specialist public order capacity it needs?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, one of the advantages of having a national police force is that over 900 police officers were deployed. I did, of course, mention in an earlier answer that if there had been an organised celebration event, that the requirements placed on policing would have been less. And at risk of raking over old arguments or old coals, Presiding Officer, it is this Cabinet Secretary for Justice that negotiated with the Finance Secretary record funding for policing in Scotland of £1.7 billion, whereas, if I recall, I think I was the only person in budget negotiations to make that pitch, and no member of the previous opposition parties and their spokespersons made that request to Ms Robeson.
Pauline McNeill.
Attacks on our police officers simply doing their jobs is unacceptable, but identifying those responsible for criminal behaviour last Saturday, the police had all the tools that are available, and now CCTV coverage of Glasgow City Centre is now no longer available 24/7 due to funding cuts. Now, in any future discussions on how we police effectively, to identify those responsible and prosecute those, and that they know that the rule of law will be enforced, will the Cabinet Secretary, and I also hope the First Minister as well, can assure Parliament that in any future discussions we will address the fully operational CCTV in Scotland's largest city, Glasgow?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, of course there is a very important role for CCTV in this regard, and also other tactics that Police Scotland have at their disposals in partnership with local authorities and other stakeholders. I do hasten to add, as recent events this week would show, that Police Scotland and prosecutors do have a good record in bringing to justice those who are intent on mobbing, rioting, vandalism and antisocial behaviour at football teams. But it is important that we all work together to ensure that policing they do indeed have the tools of the trade. And our police force, I have to put on record and commend them, are very good at following up on disorder, and those who think they have walked off free should just be very wary of any celebration, because I know that Police Scotland will leave no stone unturned in bringing those people who have been on the wrong side of the law to justice.
Alison Thewlis.
Thank you very much. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that clubs and fan organisations have a significant role to play in encouraging responsible behaviour among supporters? And would she encourage further engagement among all groups and representatives of the local community to find ways of preventing this antisocial behaviour in future, as it has had a significant impact on both residents and businesses in my Glasgow Central constituency for many years now?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, yes, I would agree with the cut and thrust of Ms Thulis's question to me, and the action that is required to be taken now. It is clear when I look at evidence in Scotland and further afield that when you connect fans' behaviour to consequences, that does have an impact. But as with many issues, there will be more than one solution. And I repeat what I said earlier, Presiding Officer, there should be nothing off the table in terms of solutions, because we have to get into a better space to prevent this happening in future.
And Stephen Kerr.
Order is to be deplored, but given the Cabinet Secretary's favourable comments on the plans and arrangements in Edinburgh, is she of the opinion that the events in Glasgow reflect a failure of planning and preparedness by Glasgow City Council?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, what I would candidly say to Mr Kerr and this chamber is that it is imperative that we see good, strong local leadership. That has to involve local authorities, but it also has to involve football authorities and football clubs. And I make the contrast based on a briefing that I had from the Chief Constable and Police Scotland that there was a coordinated set of arrangements should Heart of Midlothian Football Club if they had won the match, that was in place. And what policing requires in terms of these celebratory functions is a coordinated plan, because that complements the policing response. So what I am saying to everybody, without fear or favour, we all need to get a grip and get on the same page.
Thank you. Now, I had intended to finish the urgent question at this point. We've got 3 further members who wish to ask questions. I'll allow those 3 members to ask questions because there's clearly a lot of interest in this topic. So, first will be Graham Simpson.
Many thanks. I'm most grateful. Prior to the shocking scenes in the city centre, there was a rather unseemly pitch invasion at Celtic Park. And that's not the first time that's happened this season. And as a football fan, I'm sickened when I see such things. I was surprised to learn that pitch invasions are illegal in England but not in Scotland. And I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would agree with me that we need to take action on this to close that loophole. And if she does agree with that, that if we do close that loophole, that action should be taken swiftly against those who then break any new law.
Cabinet Secretary.
I appreciate the point that Mr Simpson raises around pitch invasion and the law. In terms of criminal law in Scotland, we have breach of the peace, and we also have the Section 38 in the Criminal Justice and Licensing 2010 Act. So while I am of the view that the legislative provision is broad enough to enable a whole range of behaviours to be dealt with, nonetheless, I will practice what I preach and keep an open mind and consider what further action we can take in terms of changes to criminal law. I mentioned earlier to Patrick Harvey that there is work that we are taking forward in terms of football banning orders, and it may well be, after further consultation, that we could be looking at the issue around criminalising pitch invasions as part of that endeavour.
Claire Baker.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, Dunfermline Athletic meet Celtic this Saturday in the Scottish Cup final, and this is a very positive experience for Fife and for our supporters. But what discussions has she had with Glasgow City Council, with Police Scotland and the clubs, so that we can ensure we don't see a repeat of the terrible scenes that we saw this weekend?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, let me assure Ms Baker that I and my officials will reach out to her local team and Police Scotland in the hope that we can reassure her with regards to this weekend.
And finally, Alan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, back to the pitch invasion. After that, the SPFL released a statement calling on the Scottish Government to introduce legislation to make it offence to encroach on the football pitch site in England and Wales. Now, that's not a panacea, because I noted that in 2018 the English FA fined West Ham £100,000 because their fans invaded the pitch. It seems to me that's a deflection tactic from the SPFL, and for years they've refused to discuss strict liability for football clubs for taking responsibility for fans in and around the stadium. So if she's engaging with the football authorities, will she pursue them on consideration of strict liability as well?
Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Mr Brown is quite correct to say that despite a very specific offence against pitch invasions in England and Wales, that pitch invasions do still occur. But I will look at that issue in good faith. We have intentions to legislate around football banning orders so we can widen the scope of our endeavours, but we will need to look at that very closely, but I am open to that. And, you know, let me repeat what I've said earlier. Even if I do, or this government changes the law, that does not for 1 minute let any other stakeholder, either locally or nationally, off the hook. And I do say to football clubs and the football authorities, with all respect, you are within your rights to call on the government to change legislation, but as someone who stands here as the Cabinet Secretary for Justice today, who has seen an impact on policing this weekend, I am well within my rights to call on them also to step up to the plate.
Thank you for the 10 colleagues who asked those questions, and for the Cabinet Secretary for her stamina and in responding to those. The next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 00074 in the name of Tom Arthur on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on the programme of business for this week. Any member who wishes to speak to the motion should press the request to speak button now. I call on Tom Arthur to move the motion.
Moved.
No member. Therefore, the question is that motion 00074 be agreed. Are we all agreed? We are all agreed. The next item of business is consideration of parliamentary motion 00075 on standing orders. I ask Tom Arthur on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau to move the motion.
Moved.
The motion has been moved, and this question will be put at decision time. There is one question to be put as a result of today's business, and the question is the motion 00075 in the name of Tom Arthur on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on standing orders be agreed. Are we all agreed? The motion is agreed. That concludes decision time, and I'd like to close the meeting. However, before any members leave, I'd like to ask all of you to please stay behind the chamber when we'll have our official group photograph for this 2026-2031 session. Thank you.